Now they will know why they are afraid of the dark. Now they will learn why they fear the night.
In an age of blockbusters, audiences were gripped by fear. Fear of the unknown. Fear of the obscure. Until one man showed them there was nothing to fear. Cinephobia. Welcome, cinephiles, to another episode of the Cinephobia podcast, part of the YouTube channel Cinephobia, your home for all things cinema and scary. I'm your host with the most, JP. Our guests today on the cast are Noah Weinstein.
Hi, how are you doing?
And Armand Hartoonian.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Host of the hit podcast WeinHart, where the duo discuss all things movies. Thanks for being on the show today, guys.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, Jeremy, thanks for having me.
Our topic today isn't any particular film or obscure gem we dug up from the vaults, but instead a subject of significant importance in the preservation of cinematic integrity. That's right, we're discussing censorship in film and TV in the modern era. Censorship is nothing new to American films. From the enactment of the Hays Code in 1930, the dissolution of the Hays Code into what we now know as the MPAA, the 1969 Oscar win of the first X-rated film, Midnight Cowboy, to the most recent news of Universal pulling the film The Hunt from theatrical release after mounting pressure from political groups. What does this mean to films and the future of artistic integrity? Let's start off with Noah. Were you planning on seeing The Hunt?
I gotta be honest, I actually had never heard of that film until I heard the news that it got pulled from Universal.
Have you heard of the film before it got pulled, Armand? Or were you aware of its existence prior to it?
You know, Jeremy, I'm probably on the same boat as Noah here. I've never heard of the film, didn't know it got pulled.
So here's a movie that obviously not a whole lot of people knew about. There weren't a whole bunch of advertising. You guys weren't aware of it. I was barely aware of it. I was actually going to go to a special screening of it the week it was pulled. They were having one of those focus groups where they invite people in, watch the movie, get their opinions. And I was going to go check it out, but I decided instead I'll just watch it when it comes on video. But now you can't. I'm sure somewhere down the line they're going to release it on DVD or something like that. I mean, they sunk a lot of money into this Universal, Blumhouse. It's got big stars in it, such as Hilary Swank. They're not just going to leave it rotting on the cutting room floor.
Oh, absolutely not.
And I think it's only going to add to the notoriety of the film. And it seemed as though this film was partially inspired by the classic story, The Most Dangerous Game, about a hunter who hunts human beings for sport. And this is just kind of a play off it, except a little bit more political. Do you feel this film would have caused any sort of political hysteria? It would have fanned the flames of the political strife that we have in this country right now? Or do you feel that Universal was just caving into a small populace's outrage? Noah, we'll start with you.
Well, you know, these things are, it's different with every film. It's different with every piece of media that comes out. It obviously must have hit some kind of nerve with people when this was released and it was tested and there was a lot of outcry about this. Now, whether or not the film was going to touch some nerves, I wish I could say more about what I didn't like or what I thought worked about the film, but I can't because I personally never saw it. Whether I think Universal caved to the masses or not, I think it may have been a good decision on their part if they were really that concerned about this influencing the wrong kind of people in the wrong way.
Right.
But I also understand that there is a creative integrity to these kinds of movies. It is important that we, as filmmakers and as people, we see these kind of stories unfold and we see this kind of lifestyle, because despite it being a controversial time right now in the country and just with the world, I think it's still important that we see that there is a side to this, and sometimes it's even helpful in some cases to actually see the other side, to understand why people do what they do to help them hopefully fix it.
It's actually kind of rather fitting that the original release date falls within this year's Banned Books Week. It was supposed to come out on September 27th, and Banned Books Week is September 22nd to the 28th.
Wow.
So pretty funny. What do you feel about all this, Armand?
Also not being able to have seen the film, what I gotta say is I have to agree with Noah in the sense that if the movie was pulled, then it must have been pulled for a certain reason. It must have, rubbed people the wrong way, or, maybe the producers made it. Something happened where they realized, oh, there's no way we can show this because of whatever reason that it could be offending to other people. I think what's important is that what a lot of people forget also is that today, when we release content, any form of content, any form of art, I think it's important to keep in mind that we're not, how should I put this? We're not infringing upon the way people feel about things, and kind of maybe doing it in a way where there's that politeness, there's that, we have that respect towards everyone and, their feelings and whatnot. Of course, every now and then when you release something, it's going to rub somebody the wrong way. But
right.
To a certain extent, I think people can understand that, okay, well, this particular form of content, if it's being taken the wrong way by the majority, then there's probably something wrong with it, and it should probably be kind of looked upon one more time and decided, okay, maybe we shouldn't release this. Maybe we can, cut down the parts where they're offending. If we're able to tell the story in a way where, people aren't offended or we're not stepping on anyone's toes, but still, you have that art form where you're able to express yourself and express the individuality that comes with that art form, but you're also not stepping on other people's toes. So that's, I guess, all I have to say about that, since I really haven't even seen it or heard of it. But,
of course. So you feel in some instances it's warranted to either edit a film in order to make sure that it doesn't offend certain groups or in a certain way,
right.
or to pull a film or release. You agree that's something
Most
that's
definitely.
okay?
Most definitely. I think we're going through very sensitive times right now, and although some people might not feel the need to be as sensitive as we should be, we still should, as as an industry more so, when we're releasing this type of content, we should be aware that when we release something, we're not releasing it and it's not going to offend anyone and make anyone feel a certain way, because obviously Trump and all the stuff he's saying right now, and people, it's just, plain to say that they're just very sensitive, and you just got to be careful at this time. Maybe if it was 5 years ago, I would say they'd probably get away with releasing it, but at this point, yeah, I think we need to just kind of tiptoe around that and kind of, like in a sense, like we're walking on eggshells. So we just have to make sure that we're not, as I said, offending anyone, and to keep that content as true to its form without, so like we're not manipulating that content, but also we're not even going about filming things that we believe that, if it's going to offend someone in the first place, then it's best to just leave that out and kind of figure out a plan B or a plan C after that, and just be, go back to the drawing board and be like, you know what, this doesn't work out. Let's try to tell the story like this, or maybe let's approach it in this way.
But don't you feel that films and art in general are meant, at least in some regards, to agitate people, to make people feel uncomfortable in some instances, to make them question their own beliefs, to make them look at things from a different perspective? For instance, violence and gore in films. That's one thing that a lot of people have rallied against, especially horror films, violence in them, and how it's going to affect children and young adults who watch it. However, it seems like that hasn't really created a whole mass culture of killers after watching horror films or anything like that. Say, for instance, the opening scene of Saving Private Ryan. That right there is a very brutally honest depiction of war.
Sure.
That probably wouldn't have been as impactful or put you in the character's position as much if it wasn't for that. So do you feel in an instance like that it would be okay to pull back on that regarding maybe some people would feel uncomfortable watching these bodies blow up, or is it more important to stay true to the integrity of the material and the piece and the story that you're trying to tell?
Sure. That's a great question. I think in cases like that, or in some films, I think it's important to show it for what it is. I would keep war, which is a good, you brought up a good topic about that. So war movies in general, I feel that it wouldn't be a war movie if you didn't show it for what it was, if you didn't portray it for what it was. So
Right.
I guess what I was referring to more is like if people are, because it is an art form, and I'm a huge advocate of Quentin Tarantino, who uses violence
Yes.
and puts violence in his movies, and I think that he has all the right to do those things because he's an artist and they're his movies. And I know people have given him a lot of garbage for, why do you put this in your movie?
Right.
Why are you such a violent director? Do we need this? And he's always said time after time that this is just my style of film, and that it would be like asking Judd Apatow, why do you like, doing comedies? And,
Exactly.
So I think I should have, specified what I meant. I think we need to stay true to the content that we show. Obviously, you shouldn't, censor, war, because that's what it should be. That's what it is. And you're portraying what it is. So how can people be upset for you portraying something for what it is, in a sense? People go out there, they risk their lives, they put their lives on the line. Essentially, not a lot of people come back, and they want to do that. They want to serve their country, and that's amazing, and it's fantastic that we have people who would risk their lives and do those things and put themselves in those positions.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, then this is the thing. This is where it goes into the kind of like the shades of gray, in a sense. Things such as war should be depicted for the way it is. I think other topics as well. For example, Django Unchained. Loved it. My favorite Tarantino movie. I loved how he portrayed slavery for what it was. It was a disgusting time in our history, and it needed to be shown, and it needed to be, exposed for what it was. And he created that topic.
Very brutally honest in his depiction of it.
Right, and rightfully so, and good for him, because that's what I like. But at the same time, I think a lot of people misconstrue fantasy with reality. They for some reason, I don't, and these people should not go see these movies if it's going to bother them. But there's that scene in Django Unchained, which you've seen it.
Yeah.
And Noah's seen it too.
Yeah.
There's that one scene where there's that big shootout in the house, and there's just squibs, just blood everywhere, people flying all over the place. It's a great scene. I remember watching it and being blown away, and I was having a blast. I was having a great time, and I actually witnessed people standing up and walking out of there. Which to me, it was interesting, because I was like, these people knew, in a sense, they knew what they were paying to see. So if you're paying to see a Tarantino movie, you're in for violence. He's been doing violence since Reservoir Dogs in 1992, and Pulp Fiction in 94, and then so on and so forth.
But they waited until the end of the film in order to walk out. But at that point, you already had a bunch of horrific scenes, more violent and disturbing than the very end scene.
Completely agree. Which is bewildering to me that these people would choose this moment to get up and walk out. Like
maybe it was the straw that broke the camel's back.
Yeah, probably. It's probably just built up.
What about just depictions of things that do just make people feel uncomfortable just on a daily basis? Like, just thought about the movie The Last House on the Left by Wes Craven. It came out in the 70s. There was a very violent depiction of two women being raped and murdered by a group of psychopaths. And that film at the time wasn't going to get released, had an X rating on it, because of the violent nature of it. Wes Craven, in all his ingenuity, decided to go ahead and just slap an R-rated sticker on it and send it out to theaters, which later showed it and became a cult classic. So even though this film doesn't depict anything real life that happened, it's depicting scenes of rape and violence and things that do make people feel uncomfortable, which may trigger some people. But maybe perhaps, if these films do trigger you and make you feel in some type of way, maybe you just shouldn't watch them. Maybe we should just monitor and police our own sort of media watching activities instead of trying to blanket a whole society with nobody should be able to watch this film because it may make some people feel a certain way. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. There is definitely a sense of what it seems, I've never seen the film itself, but Craven needed to commit to the vision of what the film was going to be.
And you got to respect that as a filmmaker.
Absolutely. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, folks, but the world is not sunshine and rainbows. Things happen for real on a daily basis.
Exactly.
This kind of stuff, it is nobody's job to say, you cannot show this because it might offend that person or this person or that person or my co-hosts or things like that.
Right.
You really have to do what is important to the story and important to the characters. I think that with monitoring your own content, I think it's very important that you understand who you are and things are gonna pop up everywhere, and people there is no general sense of what people like and what people don't like, what offends certain people, what doesn't offend certain people. Everybody has a different preference. So there's the fact that society is trying to find a gauge on this is a little ludicrous because there never will be. I'm sorry, there never will be a real gauge on it.
Regardless what sort of film you make, it's going to offend somebody at some point.
will.
You can make a Winnie the Pooh film rated G for everybody, but it's going to offend somebody at some point. Some scene, something's going to happen, somebody's going to say something.
Absolutely.
Are we going to ban any sort of thing in a film that offends anybody? Because if so, then who are we catering to? And when do we draw the line? When does it stop?
Absolutely. It's like saying we're going to ban this Winnie the Pooh movie because Eeyore's depressed or something like that. It's like, no, because
It could cause depression in people.
Yeah, exactly, right?
We wouldn't want that to happen now, would we?
Oh, no, we wouldn't. But I honestly think, though, what these directors and what filmmakers from one filmmaker to another, what we try to do is nobody, unless you're like a provocateur or something like
Right.
that, nobody ever goes out to shoot something and say, I am going to make this movie to offend this group of people because fuck those people.
Right.
Nobody ever does that. Usually what it is I want to share my vision with the world. I want to make a movie and show my voice. I want to tell a story through my lens.
Exactly.
And I think it's very important. And it doesn't, and you know, as long as you understand what you're getting yourself into and you're well researched about what you're going to do and how you do it, at the end of the day, I think good filmmaking is good filmmaking.
Absolutely.
And that, you know, offensive or not, you have to show the reality of it sometimes.
In the words of the great Al Pacino, fuck the audience. Make the kind of film you want to make and the story you want to tell. Which brings us on to the next instance of modern censorship in film, and that's Toy Story 2. Recently, Disney removed a scene from the film. It's in the outtakes and the bloopers, where the character, I think it's Stinky Pete, right? Noah, is that his name?
Yeah.
He's talking to some ladies, some Barbie dolls, and he's mentioning that he might be able to help them out with a job in Toy Story 3 if they do some favors for him. It's a sexual implication. And I guess after everything that happened with the Me Too movement and Harvey Weinstein, no relation to our Noah, by the way. He's shaking his head no, not him.
Nuh-uh.
They decided to go ahead and pull that. So do you guys feel that this was necessary? Do you feel like censoring this scene out of any future films was a necessary thing to do? Or do you feel like Disney was just kind of jumping the shark?
I will tell you a little story before I get into it. Toy Story 2 was actually one of the first movies I ever saw. And as a kid, I grew up watching Toy Story movies, particularly Toy Story 2, and I loved those outtake bloopers. That was one of the jokes I do remember from that. I'm so sad they discontinued it after, I think, Finding Nemo or something. But I think there was really an issue with it. I think it was their kind of commentary on the casting couch. It obviously was, looking back on it. I didn't understand exactly what it was as a kid.
Of course.
Because I just didn't really know. But now seeing it as an adult, rewatching it after that news broke, I realized, oh, well, okay, now I get what it's really commenting on.
Right.
I understand why a company like Disney would take that scene out, because they have a very family friendly approach, a very family vibe, especially with Toy Story, which is literally one of their flagship franchises.
Right.
It may not have been my preferred choice, because I feel like by the time you've released that film, it's water under the bridge. It has been released, and that is
It's been out for over 10 years, over 10 years at this point. I mean, what's the damage is done.
Yeah, the damage has been done necessarily. And I just think if it were made today, I probably would have said, yeah, you can go ahead and remove that scene or whatever, because it's a little too close to home. But at the time, and for what it was, I think a lot of people that were not in Hollywood or not in that just didn't get that. And I sure didn't get it as a kid. I didn't understand what exactly the real commentary behind that was until, people brought it up again and I saw it again and I was like, oh yeah, okay, now I really get what's going on here. But I think that Disney, I understand why they did it, but
It seems like it was due in part to the controversy involving John Lasseter, who was with the president of Pixar, involved in the higher-ups, and he was accused of misconduct with females on his staff. So it seemed like if it probably wasn't for that, if it was just the Me Too controversy, since they weren't directly involved with Miramax or Harvey Weinstein's company, that they might not have made that decision. Would you agree with that, guys, or no?
I think so. And another really interesting theory about it is it's funny that you bring up John Lasseter because some of the things that he was accused of, which one of the biggest stories that broke about Lasseter when he was accused was he was a big hugger. He loved hugging people really hard. And he always smelled like alcohol, smelled like grapes. Especially later in his career, he kind of, if you look at pictures, he's a more heavier guy, kind of a bigger guy.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I was thinking back to Toy Story 3 and the teddy bear character, Lotso Huggin. And it is so eerily similar to what was described of John Lasseter, where he is this big, looks like this friendly, huggable guy, but deep down, complete monster. He smells like strawberries, obviously an omission of grapes.
Was this a dig at Lasseter by the Toy Story 3 team?
That's my theory, because Lasseter was not the director on that movie. It was somebody else.
Right.
And
interesting.
I seriously think that the Lotso Huggin' Bear character may have been Pixar's inadvertent way of trying to warn us about the kind of toxic culture of Pixar.
That's pretty good.
And it's like the story totally adds up, because I've heard his story about, like, you know, he worked at Disney for a long time and Disney kind of dumped him because he wasn't good enough. And then he found Pixar and kind of turned that into his own empire.
Right.
And it's the same story as the teddy bear from the third movie, where it's like his kid just dumped him because he didn't love him anymore. And
Wouldn't
then
that
he
be
found this
crazy?
daycare and took it over. So it's like, it's
Wow.
the similarities like add up to a T. So I think this
That's
may
creepy.
have been inadvertently a reference to him.
Did you just come up with this, or did you read this somewhere? Because I feel like you just hit a major point, that you just uncovered a very special thing.
You know, I've been thinking about this for months, honestly. I've been thinking about this for a long time, and when the Lasseter news broke, and then I kind of watched Toy Story 3 again, I was kind of put two and two together. I was like, oh my god, this is so... It's weird how similar this is. And there's even a scene where, like, he was kind of accused of the whole, like, sexism thing, and lots of Huggin' Bear, there's this scene where Mrs. Potato Head's like, how dare you treat me this way? I demand respect. And then she, like, literally takes her mouth off. It's like, oh, that's better. And it's like, I was like, shit, man, I think this might be an indirect thing about how he treated people.
I'm looking online right now, and one of the first website titles that popped up was John Lasseter really loves his Lotso Huggin' Bear. Another one was interwoven into the characterization of Lotso Huggin' Bear in Toy Story 3 is a critique of John Lasseter. So obviously you weren't the first person that saw this. So I said it was, they don't think it was a grand plan to secretly cry for help. It's just something the people making the movie had on their minds. And the more Lotso started to take shape, the closer he came to how people felt about John Lasseter. Very interesting. Very funny stuff. Very funny stuff.
Yeah.
Wow. So let's move on from Toy Story 2, and let's talk briefly about the recent news about The Simpsons. There was an episode that came out a long time ago that had Michael Jackson voice it. It was actually an episode called Stark Raving Dad. This was Michael Jackson guest starring and has since been removed from syndication and any further circulation on DVDs or streaming. The reason being that the creators said that he felt the reason Michael Jackson guest starred on the episode was that so he could become more popular to children. I don't know if that's true or not, but Michael Jackson is dead. He was tried a couple times, acquitted. Regardless of whether or not you feel like he was responsible for it, does it really make any sense at this point to pull this episode from circulation and streaming? Armand, what are your thoughts?
That's a very interesting topic.
Do you remember this episode? Have you seen this episode?
I haven't seen this.
Homer
episode.
was like in a psych ward, and then he was with this other psych ward guy, and he was teaching him how to moonwalk. It was an older one.
It might ring very vague bells. As we all know about Michael Jackson, he was the king of pop. He released many fantastic albums that people to this day cherish and love. I don't know if Michael Jackson was using this to, appease to his children audience, but why would you want to become even bigger than you already are? Like when you walk down the street, you say that name, people already immediately know who you're talking about. So like, can you get any bigger than pretty much what you already are? With that also being said, I don't know if you saw Dave Chappelle's recent
Sticks and Stones.
That's right.
Loved it.
He did.
Very controversial.
Exactly. The part where he talks about specifically Michael Jackson, where he's like, even if he did it, it's Michael Jackson, So I really love Dave Chappelle. I think he's a very funny comedian. I think he's very witty. He's very quick.
And he's always been controversial as well.
Right. That's also another thing I respect about him. Just like in movies, that movies are controversial. I applaud people who bring controversy into their form of art or whatever it is, and they use a medium to get out there because it brings up discussions and whatnot. Now, he's obviously up there. He's a comedian. I had friends who watched it and said, he went too far and he shouldn't have said these things. And I agreed with him to a certain extent, but you have to understand that if you go back and if we look at Dave Chappelle's entire career, he flat out said, when I get up on stage, I do my comedy routine, and I do not apologize for anything that I do up here, because up here I'm a comedian. This is me at my job. I'm doing my job up here. I don't feel the need. I don't feel any reason or any need to apologize.
Censor himself.
I agree with him, but people have to understand, just like films are fantasy and reality is reality, when he's up there and he's telling his jokes, he obviously, he's not doing it because he has malice towards a certain group of people or whatnot. He's being a comedian and he's doing his job. He's writing jokes, and he came out and he said that I do know, although I write jokes about certain groups of people, I do know that life is tough, life is hard, and everybody deserves the right to have a happy life, a healthy life, a good life, a life where you live free. You pretty much live the way you want to live, and I hope we get to obtain that goal one day, that, as long as people are happy, if they're not bothering you, if they're not, coming into your lives and infringing upon your rights and whatnot, they should be able to live the way they want to. So with going back to the Michael Jackson thing, I don't think that he was here coercing children, to whatnot, because he was big already. Why would he feel the need to do that? And I feel like nowadays also people just try to find the littlest piece of dirt on you and just and kind of jab at you. Going back to your question, that I don't think he used that show to coerce children, because it seems preposterous that he would feel the need to use The Simpsons to do that. But no, I'm gonna turn it over to Noah right now. Noah, what do you think about this?
So when it comes to Michael Jackson, so I saw The Leaving Neverland, and I think with every case of some sort of controversy, there is warranted controversy where I feel like I understand why this is being controversial, and I really see their point, and yeah, this really there should be something done about this. And then there's creative controversy. With creative controversy, I feel that it isn't as valid of an excuse. But with this Leaving Neverland documentary, with Michael Jackson's case, I believe him. I buy it. I seriously do. Unfortunately, there may have been some things about it that didn't add up, but at the same time, they were children.
So as someone who believes it, do you feel like it was right for them to pull that episode from any future DVD streaming, etc.?
Well, with somebody like Michael Jackson, I feel like if they have done something truly heinous and horrendous like that, then yes, I think it was the right move to get rid of it. They didn't want to taint their show with any more, with this kind of thing, and have somebody that really did something terrible in real life affect the thing like this.
But regardless of whether or not you believe that he did it or he didn't do it, you still believe that, given how you feel about it, that they shouldn't include his voice in that episode. Do you feel like it might make more sense for them to just replace it with another actor's voice in the same instance, like what they did with Ridley Scott film that came out a couple years ago, All the Money in the World, that starred Kevin Spacey, and they reshot all the scenes with him month prior to it came out in the light of everything that happened with the accusations against him. So they hadn't released the film at that point. They had a lot of money in it. So they decided to do that, incurring the cost
Yeah.
for the benefit of saying that we did not have somebody who was accused of these things in our film. So same thing. So do you feel that they should have pulled the episode altogether? Maybe they should have replaced the voice, kind of in the same way that they did it with All the Money in the World? Or what would have been your approach to go about it?
My approach would have been, in this case, well, if I were to backtrack a little bit, unfortunately, with the Michael Jackson episode, with an episode like that, it is unfortunately water under the bridge. It's been out for years. I think we discussed this earlier. The damage has been done. Whatever damage there was, it has happened, and we have to move on. If a news story like that broke about your actor in a film,
and months before it comes out,
months before it comes out,
A-list actor, large supporting role.
He was J. Paul Getty, the villain of the movie.
The guy with all the money in the world.
All the money in the world, yeah.
So you agree with their decision to replace him with Christopher Plummer in those scenes?
There was already a fan outcry. There was a public outcry about it, and it had hurt and affected so many people, and it had come in a wave of not just him being accused. It was Harvey Weinstein. It was Matt Lauer. It was Charlie Rose. It was the very beginnings of this new uprising of this Me Too era beginning. And I think at the time, a lot of studios were taken aback by it because they didn't really know how to deal with it, and they just they realized that, if we keep this in here, we are actually going to lose money because people are not going to want to watch a movie about an actor, regardless of how great the performance is, that this man did some pretty heinous thing.
Do you feel like we should go back and remove them from other films? Do you feel like any films that include Michael Jackson, a score from Michael Jackson, Kevin Spacey starring in it, or anybody else that was accused of any improprieties in the past, such as John Lasseter with Pixar, or anybody else, should we not watch these films anymore? Should we avoid them? Should we boycott them? Should we try to digitally replace some things? I'd like to get your opinion on it, Armand.
That's a very, very good question. I don't think we should replace them per se. I feel like the footage is already there. It's been shot, whatever has been done has been done. But I honestly think when people go back and watch these films, there are not going, and the films of the accused, I'll call them, the accused of the Me Too movement, and the ones who were charged with what they did, I don't think I can ever go back and watch a Kevin Spacey movie the same way. And before I thought I still think he's an amazing actor, but before I thought he was an amazing actor. He was one of my favorite actors, There's no point in, and I like how you said digitally, replacing. That was interesting. I think just for the sake of what it is, I think these movies have to be left just the way they were. And honestly, I think it's going to change the way people view these films when they watch them in the future.
One of the instances that I also want to point out, which kind of has to do with the same thing, is over at Netflix, the first season finale of 13 Reasons Why had its suicide scene edited down after it was already released based on complaints from people, how it affected them and stuff like that. So we already have modern instances of people releasing it and later taking it out. So do you feel like that's warranted, or do you feel like it's just on a case-by-case basis?
That's tough. This also, I have to go back and, coming from a background where you're in the movie industry and you're working for the TV and movie industry, I have to protect content for what it is. I'm a firm and sole believer that as we went back and we discussed this, I feel that any artist should be able to portray their art form the way they want to. When you're portraying art, you shouldn't really censor it to a point where it's G-rated, because you're taking away what it actually is, because this is life. We feel things, we go through things, we experience things, If you had a friend who was going through these things, and I actually had a friend who back in high school, unfortunately, his name was Campbell. His parents were divorced, and fortunately, he had a girlfriend. His girlfriend broke up with him. That was the straw that broke the camel's back, and he threw himself off the I think it was the roof of our high school, and he hit the ground, and the guy died. And it's sad because those things happen in real life, and when it's reality, sure, you can't. When it's in a movie's job is to depict and portray reality as much as it possibly can. It's supposed to mimic it and make it as authentic as possible. And if you're taking that authenticity away from art, is it really like, are you being true to it in a sense? Are you being true to a film when you're grabbing what people feel, that pain that they feel? Why censor life for what it is? You made a great point about it. If these things bother you, if these things aren't something you're into, if you don't like horror movies, don't watch horror movies. Me, for example, if you don't like violence, don't watch violence. I like horror movies, but I prefer horror movies that have a psychological thriller aspect, and because I like to think when I'm watching movies. And for example, if you don't like, I personally can't stand the Hostel movies.
It's more torture porn, a little bit more focusing on
Exactly.
the violent and gore films as
Right.
opposed to scares, psychological horror characters, and things like that. I agree, and I feel the same way.
Yeah. If there's a reason, if you're going to film, because I think when you're filming, you need to show your audience this character dying. If this monster or this creature is killing this person, there's a reason that they're doing it. Not so that they're just doing it just to do it. There's a purpose behind it, an action to a reaction in a sense. Or,
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, Noah, what do you think about this?
So about 13 Reasons Why, I mean, I don't think people should really shy away from the reality of a situation. It doesn't matter if it's fictional or if it's non-fictional. If there is a suicide that has to be portrayed and seen, then you have to portray the suicide, you know what I mean?
Right. Can't candy coat it.
Yeah, there is no candy coating. In fact, I think that would be a disservice to a show like that.
Agreed.
It's all about
Absolutely.
suicide. I haven't watched 13 Reasons Why.
Same. I haven't seen it either.
I think it definitely, if it's getting this many people talking, I think they definitely hit a nerve with the way the suicide and the way it's portrayed.
Absolutely.
My thing about when you do a movie like this or a movie that pertains to these kinds of topics, I don't mind at all if you're going to go there. But what I do appreciate is when they really do their research behind it, when they really understand what it's like. How does it feel? What is somebody going through when they're feeling this way? What are the things that they do? What are the habits that happen?
Which I think was the main purpose of the show, was to sort of give a voice to these people who felt bullied and felt like suicide was a way out for them. And I'm sure in addition to the people that, it might have been a detriment to, a lot of people saying that suicide rates spiked in high schools and stuff after the show, but I'm sure it helped a lot of people as well. A lot of people saw it, saw that same person in them, and saw that there was a way out of their predicament other than taking their own life.
Absolutely. And I think that if that is what you're trying to be, if you're trying to take this message and be authentic with it, and this doesn't just go for suicide, this goes for everything, depression, anxiety, or any sort of issue, whether it be like issue with society or personal issue. As long as you are trying, I think it's a great thing that people try to get these stories out there, because these stories need to be told, they need to be seen, and
they need to be seen in their uncensored versions as well.
They do, and you have to go to these places for people to truly understand what people are really going through. I can't really, how much do you get when somebody just tells you, hey man, how's it going? I'm depressed. Like, you don't get much out of that. You have to see, if you're doing a show about somebody that has serious depression, you have to see what they're going through with the depression. I think it's necessary. You have to show it, or else you're doing it a disservice.
And isn't that the whole point of films in general, is to make you sympathize with the character and see things from their perspective that you might not usually see from before you walk into the theater? One article that I found when I was researching this topic that I felt was really good, it was on tailslate.net. It was written by Anne Palladino, and it was called The Hunt and the New Era for Forbidden Films. In that, they mentioned the 13 Reasons Why episode and it being edited. And in it, author says, going back to revised films is nothing new. Yes, studios have every legal right to make these alterations or withhold their products from release. However, speaking as a critic, consumer, and collector, this trend is a rather distressing one. As much as we'd like to think that we have the freedom to choose which films we'd like to see in their original forms, instances like these serve as reminders that such thoughts are greatly mistaken. The increasing shift towards digitization and away from physical media is only making things worse. So which kind of brings us into the next point of this whole conversation, is physical media versus digital media. how important is actually having physical copies of films in the age of censorship, where, such as in the instance of The Simpsons, where they're not going to release this episode anymore. You're not going to be able to find it unless you already own a copy of it. Obviously, the government does not have the right to come into your house and demand copies of films which are banned or have scenes in them. So how do you feel about owning physical media compared to digital media? Do you feel it's important as a consumer?
DVDs and Blu-rays, by the time we get to maybe 25 years, 30 years down the line, it's going to become a time capsule. Blu-rays and box sets of our favorite films and TV shows, it's going to become like a dinosaur-like object when somebody says, "Whoa, you have Jurassic Park on DVD? Oh my God."
I don't know about you guys, but I still have VHS copies. I have a VCR. I only bust it out on certain occasions.
Wow, really?
I still collect VHS, especially older stuff, especially stuff that hasn't been released on DVD or Blu-ray yet, even though they're not really good quality.
Much respect to that, I just gotta say.
But I think that there is a sense where I think part of the censorship has to do with the times that we're living in. We're living in an era of social media and the information overload, where you can pick up your phone or your iPad and you can see on the internet all, controversy about, like we were just talking about, all these people that have done, that were in the Me Too movement, in the Me Too thing. And
you can comment on it, and you can share it, and you can spread the information.
And you can spread it, and there will be more public knowledge about that. So, I think right now we're living in a time where I think, like most eras and most time periods, there is a waxing point and there is a waning point, and there will inevitably be a waning point to this. People will become a little bit less sensitive to this kind of stuff, and Facebook and social media is already starting to become kind of taboo, and it will become a more natural thing. People will pick up on this stuff. I think it's very important to have physical copies of your favorite movies or your TV shows, because one day it's going to become an ancient artifact that your kids or your grandkids won't know about, and you will get to educate them, kind of like we were educated on telegraphs and old telephones. They were like these big blocks,
Right.
Stuff like that. I think it's important. I think it's a great little time capsule for historical purposes, but also just your purpose. It's like nostalgia, it's something
Absolutely.
that you got to keep it.
Absolutely. Armand, how do you feel about this? Physical media, digital media, what are you a big proponent of? Do you have more physical or digital media?
I have more physical media. I love collecting things, digital's cool and all, but like there was some, even as a kid, when like I would have a VHS or like, a DVD or anything, I would like, there was something just it being tangible.
Hold
just
it in your
like,
hand,
holding
look
it in
at
your hand
it.
and knowing like, and telling people, hey, look, I have a copy of this one. Whereas now you can just grab your phone and go, oh, I have a copy of like Fight Club on my phone somewhere or something like that.
Yeah, I got Moby Dick too. I can read Moby Dick. I can watch Fight Club all on the same screen.
Call me Ishmael.
But, I have to say, and this is the thing, I'm very forward, I'm very open, I would consider myself a very open individual. There are some things that, as the saying goes, no school like the old school, like old school. So, like, I have to say that just having, and this is maybe it's a personal thing, I like physical media more because it's there, it's tangible. There was just something about like, taking a DVD to a friend and saying, hey man, like I got this new movie, it's so cool. Like, you mind if I come over to your house and we pop it in there and, we kind of watch it together. And now you're kind of like, hey, do you want to just show up to my house, bring your phone along with you? We'll both individually stare into our phones and watch our own digital copies of whatever. I don't know.
Right. Or let's watch whatever properties Netflix has license over that is on their streaming network, which might not include a lot of things that you might not see otherwise.
That's right. Absolutely.
Before we leave, I just want to touch on one more topic real quick. The last one I want to talk about is the smoking controversy in Stranger Things. It was season 3. Okay, so there was a big outcry. I'm sure a lot of you folks heard about it. Jim Hopper, other people in the show smoking. People took offense to it, particularly the Truth Initiative, which is a youth-focused anti-tobacco group. This is actually from an article that I saw in IWF.org, Independent Women's Forum, entitled Netflix Censors Smoking on Stranger Things, where they discussed Netflix deciding to make the decision, and this is actually a quote from them, going forward, all new projects that we commission with ratings TV-14 or below for series or PG-13 or below for films will be smoking and e-cigarette free, except for reasons of historical or factual accuracy. Now, Stranger Things takes place in the 80s, so it would make sense that people smoke in the show. Given that it's such a popular show and so many people watch it, it makes sense that there would be somebody trying to make an outcry of it, considering how influential it is. But do you feel like this is just people having too much moral outrage over the wrong things, or do you feel that things like this should be cut down on in film? Let me hear your thoughts, Noah.
I personally think that it's all about servicing your story, and it's all about a servicing of the time period. This show, like you said, Stranger Things, is set in the 1980s, where there wasn't as much awareness about smoking or the effects of smoking. So It would make sense that more characters like David Harbour's Jim Hopper would smoke. I really don't think it's a problem. I think it's important. I think it's actually what makes the show in some ways authentic. It's kind of what makes these time capsules, per se, time capsules. You could make the exact same argument about Mad Men, for example, where that entire show is literally sexism at workplace. Drinking, smoking. That is essentially what made Mad Men. That's
the show.
It was a time period piece. And same goes for Stranger Things. Even though smoking isn't really even though it's not like the biggest part of Stranger Things, it was a factor of the 80s. Stranger Things, all 3 seasons are a homage to the 1980s.
Do you think that they should insert cell phones or something else in the hands of Jim Hopper when he's smoking in later episodes to maybe curtail any of our further youth being corrupted by the dangers of cigarettes?
Well, if they put a cell phone in his hand, then they would make the argument that Jim Hopper's a time traveler from 2019.
That would make absolutely no sense.
Absolutely no sense.
It reminds me of, remember when Spielberg came out with the re-released edition of E.T., and I think instead of a shotgun in a guy's arm, he replaces it with like a walkie-talkie or something like that. It's kind of the same watering down of things that just like when you look at it later, they're like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have did this, And is that right to do that? Even though they are the filmmakers, they already put it out. It's historical record. Stranger Things already out. We already seen the smoking, for Christ's sake. What's it going to affect? Armand, tell me. What do you think? Did you start smoking after you saw Stranger Things?
Very heavily. I'm a chain smoker, and I can't stop. That's probably, and I blame that show, definitely. No.
But we do have some points here.
Look, I'm just going to go back and repeat what I said, throughout this, this entire podcast, which was pretty much, you cannot you cannot, nor should you water down this portrayal of life that we're doing called making movies and making TV shows and making content. Because when you do these things, people smoke. I mean, what are you going to do? They know what they're doing to themselves. They know that they're shortening their life, and they know that they're risking or increasing their chances of lung cancer, but they're going to do it anyway because they like smoking, and that's just the way it is, And, if you're bothered by the fact that they're using cigarettes here, I mean, and I haven't seen the show. Were the cigarettes was it in one of the kids' hands or something?
It was all adults from what I remembered. It was all adults, and it was just regular, normal, just going about.
It was just the adults. I mean, it was mostly, if I remember it correctly, it was really
mostly just Jim Hopper, the sheriff.
It was mostly just David Harbour's character, Jim Hopper, smoking. None of the kids was just him.
Yeah. If it was the kids smoking, that'd be a little bit different.
Right. And to that I say, okay, if an adult grown man is smoking, I don't see the point of that, because unless someone has tied him to a chair and they're putting 50 cigarettes in his mouth and lighting it simultaneously, and they have a gun to us and you better smoke all these cigarettes, or preposterous sort of situation like that. The thing is, this is the same example of we're at a time right now where yes, people are sensitive, but there's a difference between being sensitive about life and reality itself and being sensitive about some fictional thing you saw on the television the other day. Because you have to remind yourself that these things that you see on TV, they're content. They're being made by producers. They're being greenlighted by producers, and producers are done their research on these things. And it's not just... And a lot of people out there, they don't know the effort and the time and what it takes. When you see theaters, when you see any piece of content, any form of art, you have to realize that just like any other profession, a lot of time and effort went into these things.
So much time, energy.
To make it what it is. And there's cast and crews of 300 to almost 500 people on set, maybe even more. Who knows? The point is that there's making these things come alive and, trying to keep it as true as possible. these people have been doing this for years. They've done their research. So if they know how to do these things, if they're aware that this is the content they're putting out there, they're not just ignorantly putting content out there and saying, screw it. If we offend someone, we offend someone. We don't care. We're making art. They're aware of this. So if they're aware that this is out there, then a big deal should not be made of someone smoking a cigarette.
Pick your battles, people.
Right.
Pick your battles.
That's what I have to say about that.
Watching overweight 40-year-old police sheriff smoking on a show is definitely not going to entice young children to pick up smoking. And as a matter of fact, according to CDC, today's smoking rates are down across all races, genders, and ages. This is from the article that I mentioned that was on IWF.org by Betsy Peterson. She also mentioned that this quote from Nancy Burke, a clinical psychologist, who begs the question, what about personal and parental responsibility? Isn't it your own responsibility and the responsibility of parents to censor their children or what they watch themselves instead of relying on a government entity to do it? Another couple things that I thought very interesting in the article that they mentioned was the dangers of cigarette smoking are common knowledge, and the senseless censorship comes off as controlling. Additionally, parents need to accept the responsibility for their own child without panicking over a show that millions of people watch. Censoring is a slippery slope that can lead to special interest groups capitalizing on alarmism. Netflix should consider how easily they fall for fake moral outrage. And that's all I got to say on that topic. Discussing stand-up comedy that you brought up with Dave Chappelle's Sticks and Stone show, it seems in society that stand-up comedians are sort of the cornerstone of free speech and being able to say what you want and being able to agitate people, but in a very lighthearted manner. So in an age where we have comedians being attacked for jokes they're telling, I think we have to be more vigilant than ever in terms of people censoring this sort of material and things that we watch.
Yes, I agree.
All right. Well, I think that was a great discussion. I had a great time talking with you guys today. I'd like to thank my guest, Mr. Noah Weinstein, no relation to Bob or Harvey. Thank you for being on the show today, sir.
Thank you so much, Jeremy.
And I'd like to thank our guest, Armand Hartoonian, for being on the show as well. It was such a pleasure, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. Really appreciate it, man.
You guys will have me on your podcast. WeinHart coming on soon. How can these guys find your podcast, by the way?
Well, you can find it on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel. Just click on WeinHart. Episodes 1 through 3 are out now.
How do you spell WeinHart for the folks that don't know?
So it is WeinHart.
And just to add, the W is capital. So it's a capital WEIN. And those are the first 4 letters of Noah's last name. And Hart, capital HART, the first 4 letters of my last name.
So that's WeinHart, and
I love it.
We're really happy with the first 3 episodes that we released, and we can tell you that more episodes are coming very soon. Episodes 4 and 5 are probably going to be around probably the end of the month, hopefully.
Yeah, you guys are doing a great job over there. You guys got the video going on and everything. I watched it. I love the intro video. It's great.
Well, we got to get you on as our next guest,
Most definitely.
Let me know. I'd love to come over. We'll have a blast. I'll tell you what. So thank you guys so much for being on. Again, go check out their podcast on YouTube. WeinHart is the name of the YouTube channel. They discuss all things movies, just like we do over here on Cinephobia. I've been your host, JP. Don't forget to check out our other episodes of the podcast and click those like and subscribe buttons to show your support. As always, stay cheesy and remember, there's nothing to fear but film itself.